Hey, greetings everybody, it's Gleekon here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. On our last episode we read another chapter in the Cycle of Hatred where we saw the tensions continue to build. Jaina and Thrall are starting to bicker, but they also have a strong friendship to rely on. But the people, and particularly we saw a glimpse of Jaina's people, are just really not trusting the orcs, and it's not going to take a lot of uh, it's not going to take a lot to make the conflict bubble over. Um, so stay a while and listen as we continue this. This is our kind of parallel, weird, non-canon deep dive that we're doing, and we're gonna read the 5th chapter in the World of Warcraft. Actually, the Warcraft role-playing game. Interestingly enough, even though we are now a few years still when this is written before the World of Warcraft game comes out, this chapter is called The World of Warcraft. So that idea is being bandied about. I don't know who that bird is. Maybe it's Medivh flying around a Duratar. That looks like either Duratar or Thunder Bluff or something. Hard to say. Okay, so we're going to kind of just skim through. It looks like the introduction is just kind of showing us how, like, where the world is in its state. Looks like it's talking about, hey, we are in the immediate aftermath of the Third War. That there's two continents that are separated from each other by a giant maelstrom. The Horde is now coming to be based in Kalimdor, and the Alliance has been kicked out of the other continent, the Eastern Kingdoms, which is what it'll come to be called. And now they're trying to exist there as well. Meanwhile, demons and their minions, the undead, are still just ravaging the land. Meanwhile, the Horde is also establishing bases in Thunder Bluff in Mulgore, while the humans have Ironforged dwarves as their friends, and High Elves are still in the picture at this point in time. They've not become Blood Elves yet. Jaina Proudmoore leads the Alliance, and although she is having some struggles because of she basically took actions that led to the death of her father, Admiral Dalen Proudmoore, because he couldn't forgive the orcs at all. And we're beginning this new era. So there are some affiliations. There's an affiliation called the Alliance, with Rift, which is, at this point, it contains the humans, the Ironforged dwarves. It says magic and the Alliance. There are those who study arcane magic, and there are priests that study the Holy Light, and paladins, the Knights of the Silver Hand. Those are the main magic users at this point in time. That's it. Technically, they're the priests of Elune as well. The High Elves at this point are still part of the Alliance because we haven't done the Frozen Throne yet. And there are the Night Elves, which they're at this point they're already tentatively considering them part of the Alliance. Although, in my mind, there still needs things still need to happen to make that solidify. And there are half elves. We do not see these in World of Warcraft. They are almost never, if ever, mentioned in any lore, but there are certain heroes that have half-elven children. It says they're not new to the Alliance races. Sure, I guess elves have been around for a long time. For longer than the humans really came to power. So you would imagine they would be rare but in existence, I guess. But because that half elves are a more prominent Dungeons and Dragons race, they're making an explanation for that. They're jamming that in. On the Horde side of things, you have the orcs, you have the Tauren, as we saw. Now, one thing that they've completely booted out are the trolls. That's interesting, notable. The trolls. Also, we have yet to have the Forsaken become one of the races because they are not. They're not free yet. Their will is not their own yet. They also give an independent faction of the goblins, whereas we know the goblins eventually join the Horde, but there are many neutral goblins. There are also half orcs. This is again shoehorning Dungeons and Dragons in. It's basically they're saying that whatever exists, they're the offspring of rape. Humans on orc, or more common orc on human. They tried that with Garona and Warcraft 1. They ended up retconning that. There just doesn't seem to be a lot of overlap for that. Um, However, because this is Dungeons and Dragons, they're pushing that in. They've given us a map. This is the map of Kalimdor, and it's notable in that there are a lot of features that were not mentioned in any game so far that are here. The Caverns of Time, the Ungoro Crater, Silithus, the Tanaris Desert, Feralis, Moradon in Deathless, Mulgore Thunder Bluff, the Thousand Needles, Dustwallow Marsh with Theramore Isle, Baal Modon at the bottom of the Barrens, Ratchet, Razorfen Downs. This area is, I think, somewhat in Warcraft 3. The Stone Talon Mountains, Ashenvale Forest, Durotar with Orgrimmar. Now, the Echo Isles, this does shift down here. That's one main shift. Mount Hyjal, Nighthaven, which is in Moonglade, that shifts kind of up over here, and Darkshore. So a lot of this is, I don't know where they're getting these maps from, because most of these have not appeared in any games. So these ideas, I think, are existing, and maybe, I mean, we've read about them, but it's hard for me to kind of disentangle what and where we read it. But it's very possible that this is a map that one of the first maps that contains a lot of these things. This is like a rough draft, but we're getting closer and closer to the map that we know. And they don't even show the Eastern Kingdoms, because for this particular campaign setting, there's no point to go there. It's just an undead land. All right, so now what's more interesting in this chapter is we can talk about some features of each of the regions of Kalimdor. So it's going to go alphabetically, and we'll just look at it. We're not going to read every single word, but we'll just glance through for notable things. Ashenvale Forest, so we know that exists. The geography is dense to medium temperate forest. I guess that's more of a Dungeons and Dragons thing. It says it's a great arc, and that's true. That's how it's shaped. Now, the inhabitants, there are wildkin, which is true. Ancients, which are like sentient trees, those also, that's also true. We've got a picture, probably, I guess, of Ashenvale. There are Night Elf Sentinels that stroll throughout it with the Forest Riders. However, I'm trying to remember when, but I think it's in the first part of Warcraft 3. We know there's orcs that are beginning to battle throughout Ashenvale. So the horde is there. So there are no cities. That obviously changes, but there is a Forest Rider camp. The Gold Crease Mine, we'll have to look and see if that's still there. The Shrine of Asina, I think, is, and I also think Windshear Pass, I think these things stay. Ajara, interesting. It wasn't pictured on our map. Yes, it exists right to the north of Durotar. It says it's the shattered coast along Kalimdor's northern border that was once part of Zinajari. That's true. It's just seas, cliffs, rocky islands. It says a few whisper that the dark portal that first brought the demons rests under the sea. That's curious. I'll wonder. We'll check that out in the future if anything ever happens with that. It's a temperate, aquatic, and hilly region. The Night Elves consider this place cursed. There is an orc trading village called Grim Ulang. There is also the ruins of Zinajari out in the Coral Sea. They say bands of undead have started to come about. And in Classic, I think for a while, there's not a lot in Ajara at all. They definitely expand that region in Cataclysm. But I think before Cataclysm, there's not a lot going on there. We'll have to check out. But I always remember Ajara kind of being like an empty zone. We'll check it out. Okay, the Barrens, that's a huge area. It's and we read in our current book that it's considered a neutral zone. It's a hot, rugged hills and plains. It's a sprawling area between Mulgore and Durotar. So even though it's neutral, it's really a horde zone, horde quest zone. After Cataclysm, there's definitely some Alliance quests. There's probably some before as well. It says there used to be Kaldorei cities here. And there's a lot of interest in the Alliance and the Horde. I think there's some neutral quest hubs there, like Ratchet. The Gold Road is there. Centaur warbands go throughout it. the Quillbor because they've been displaced from Durotar, so they're all over the Barrens. That's interesting. And they have their bases there, Razorfen Down and later on Razorfen Crawl. Thunder Lizards, animals like lions, Baelmadon to the south. So there's also something called the Circle of Dust, a semicircular canyon. I'm not sure if that actually still exists, but they do have that big canyon in the middle of it where the harpies are. The Field of Giants. Big giant mounds. I don't know. I mean, there are mountains down there, but I can't think of anything like that Field of Giants. There's the Gold Road, Ratchet, Shady Rest Inn. I feel like that might exist. It says minstrels have immortalized the Shady Rest Inn's proprietor. He'll bring you the mead, he'll bring you beer, a grinning face from ear to ear. He served us all from year to year. We call him Smiling Jim. Maybe. The Shady Rest Inn sounds familiar. And then we talk about Ratchet, the city of trade princes. I don't think it stays that. The trade princes have their own places. But look, we already have the Venture Company. I don't think we've read about that anywhere else. So this is definitely the first we're seeing the Venture Company, which is a big deal with the goblins. They host arenas with gladiatorial tournaments. That goes away. Princes of the Golden Circle. So some of this gets scrapped, some of it they keep. Law keepers and mercenaries prowling the waterfront. It says the sky is just as busy because it's full of goblin zeppelins and other. It's like an airport. That kind of dies out and it really just becomes a port. He says, yeah, but it's a high heat. Basically, that it's a desert land and the D&D rules of how you have to travel through it. But look, the South Sea Freebooters. Again, we have not read of these, but that is absolutely part of the Ratchet area. Titus Stairs, coastal fishing village of Titus. An ex-Kelderai city. I don't know if that's any ruins of that still exist. I don't think they're still there. Maybe that's a Murloc thing or something. All right, so we have Darkshore, which we've only just read about in Chronicles. It says some night elves have gone to this port in Aberdeen. That is the name of the town. So that's just cool. How many of these names are put on paper here and published for what may be the first time? It's a temperate aquatic with forest and mountains. It's in the area that we know it is. It's a night elf area. They also are fighting the Naga and Murlocs. That's true. That happens over there. Black Fathom Bay, I think that's in Black Fathom Deeps, absolutely. That's a dungeon that exists. Does it? Is Black Fathom Deeps southern Darkshore? I think so. Darkshore Ruins, located south of the Master's Glaive. And the Master's Glaive is a big monument buried in an immovable boulder called Old God's Skull. I don't know if that survives. I'm not sure if that's there. All right, Desolus. So we know from Chronicles this is where the centaurs basically ravaged the land so that the Tauren couldn't live there. There was some kind of elemental conflict. It says the Burning Legion rained its destruction upon there. And it says the Night Elves left the Centaur out of necessity for their own survival, letting the Twisted Race assume control of Desolus. We know we read in Chronicles that there's an entirely different history behind that. Hot Rugged Hills. There are five Centaur tribes: black, brown, green, red, and yellow. They don't have their names yet. We know that they will become the what are they called? Not the Magcar. That's the Orcs. There's two real tribes that you can do quests with and get their reputation up. I can't remember their names off the top of my head. Maradon is already being discussed. Cultural Center. So this is actually pretty cool that some of these are coming out. A Kodo Graveyard, Opal Ridge. I'm not sure. A Realm of Harpies is a place called Spearhold, the center of the Red Tribe. Yes, and they have Khans, but the Khans already existed in Warcraft 3. Temujin. I think that's from Warcraft 3. All right, there's Durotar, which we know about it. Orcs and Quillbor. Animals, Blackblood, Dry Gulch Ravine, I think stays. Orgrimmar's the capital. Thunder Ridge, Dustwallow Marsh, we know about that. That's where Theramore's attached to. It's a swamp. The inhabitants are murlocs, some raptors, saltwater mixed in the swamp. Humans, of course, are there. Black dragons, calling this area Worm Bog, so that's cool. Yet another feature that made its way into World of Warcraft. There's something called the Bluefen. I think it's still there. Brackenwall Village is there. The Broken Giant is a northern dwarven titan statue. I don't know. We'll have to check it out. Dragonmark, I do believe, is still there. There are more, definitely. Witch's Hill. A Murloc Witch. That changes. It's not a Murloc Witch, but there is a quest hub in there where you do a witch stuff. And then here it talks about Theramore, which is an Alliance fortress. And that's still true. And it changes a little bit. I think it gets flooded in Cataclysm, but it sticks around. There's the Worm Bog. All right, the Fellwood. The history is that it was protected by Cenarius. The Burning Legion befouled it. That sticks. It is it's a sparse forest, but it has been touched by the accursed touch of the Burning Legion. It's a dark and haunted and fell-colored wood. Has no village or people. It's a cursed land, and I think that's true. There's just little camps. Lots of beast bears, cursed furbolgs. There's some undead and demons throughout it. Yeah, makes sense. There's Bloodvenom Falls, maybe. Jadenar is still there. Petrified Forest, I don't think so. Timbermaw Hold, absolutely. I love me in that tunnel. That's where you can work on the rep for one of the two Furbolg places. Hyjal Summit, this does not make its way into World of Warcraft until Cataclysm. It's shut off. It's a sacred mountain. There is a Well of Eternity there. Illidan and Malfurion have dealt with things and each other and kind of had conflict come out. That's where the final battle in the Reign of Chaos happened. It's a rugged big mountains. There are some elves, it's saying, that still live there, and lots of animals and hippogriffs. Okay. The Eternity Bridge with the Well of Eternity and the World Tree. That's all that's going on there. The Moonglade, I see this tamps down and just becomes a druid place somehow. So they says it is the druid's home. It's a safe haven for elves. It's considered holy. It's pretty much just beasts and night elves. It says there's some satyrs and furbolgs in there, along with, of course, treants. That land, I mean, it's like a druid hub zone. That's about it. There's not really a lot that goes on there. Yeah, some nature creatures, some what are those other things too? Not satyrs, the dryads. It says there are some barrow dens and moon wells. There are moon wells there. I don't know how many barrow dens are still there in the city of Nighthaven. Yeah, not a lot going on there. Mulgore, this is a rich plain that the elves used to use, but it was shundered, and eventually the centaur claimed it. It's constantly at war with the Tauren. Rugged hills, plains, and some rugged mountains, those obviously become mesas and plateaus. The centaur roam through it. They've been tamped down, really. It's the Mulgore's peaceful land now. There's Dalshbaran. I don't know that that's still there. Grassmount, don't know. Lake Stonebull, maybe. Monolith Glen, I don't know. Red Rock Mesa, I think so. If not there, then it's somewhere else in Thunder Bluff. Of course, Porous Stone, they have like Native American cave paintings. It says they can use the stone to communicate with basically spirits. So we'll have to check and see if the Porous Stone really exists, but here we're hearing some of those things. Okay, there's the Stone Talon Mountains. They were once a low set of hills, but the sundering pushed them up into big mountains. A lot of wild beasts, hippogriffs, kobolds, striders. So striders are being mentioned. Swoops, that's something. Crag panthers, saber-toothed cats, rock elementals, wyverns. Okay, so some of these come from Warcraft 3, and some of them are probably getting originated right here, but maybe a lot of them came from, because you could fight a lot of little random, like, neutral monsters. The Ill Winds of Stone Talon. The winds whip through it, and that's just telling you how to simulate a condition using this table of how windy. It's supposedly a super windy place. So cool, I guess. Merkfallen Lake, yes, that's still there. Stone Talon Peak, But Valley of the Blood Furies, it is a Harpy Valley, probably still there. Windshear Crag, all those are still there. It's really impressive. I just can't. I just, even though they're a few years away from World of Warcraft, clearly behind the scenes, they're creating that world. Tanaris Desert, it's a desert. It says that there's wildlife, some drakes and dragons. But they don't mention how this is really going to become a goblin zone, so that part hasn't come yet. The Abyssal Sands, the Caverns of Time, with those Dormu, so that's already exists. Gadget Czar, that becomes Gadget Stan, so that's still, it's a neutral god. So they do have that existed, but there's more to come. Uldum, the dungeon, that is that already exists in their mind there. Northrok, I don't know. Thousand Needles, it is a river canyon with a dried lake. We know after Cataclysm it fills up. Hot desert, rugged mountains, just animals. I think there's a lot of Tauren there too, at least now anyway. And I think after Cataclysm, the Twilight, whatever they're called, the people that want the old gods to come back, they're there. There's something called the Scorch Basin. So not a lot there. And it says thanks to Goblin prospecting. So yes, there is a Goblin presence. And eventually that becomes that Goblin Speedway. Winter Spring Valley already existing. And actually I think that was in Warcraft 3. A cold medium forest. If you want to have a snowland, inhabitants are a blue dragon, Kobolton, and some elves, snowcats, snow bears, caverns of Mazerthil, Dark Whisper Gorge. I don't know. Everlook is the goblin town there. It says it's the last point of civilization. Oh, it is run by goblins. So yeah, those neutral cities existing and run by goblins are where they say they are. It says the rest of the world traveling's hard enough, but sure, Lordaeron does exist. We get a page or so, not even half a page on that. It just says it's a shattered land, reduced to ash, full of undead. There is possibly a new alliance forming, but there are skeletons and acolytes protecting crypts, and necropolises in greater numbers, so it's hard to say. People are dreaming of a brighter future. It does say that the people of Lordaeron huddle around their campfires and wonder what happened to Jaina. In Northrend, they're saying this is the Lich King's stronghold. Arthas fell to the influence of evil. They're kind of recapping what happened there. It's an ice land and full of undead at this point in time. There are ice trolls, and they avoid those people. Arthas drew Frostmourne. Yeah, so all of the things that are going to happen haven't unfolded yet. Stormwind, sure, it says it's a rebuilt settlement. Grapevines entwine abandoned seasons. So as of this point, Stormwind is wilderness. Forest trolls and ogre lords are just roaming it. So at this point, just a few short years before World of Warcraft, somehow Stormwind is just ruins. That might get changed. Okay, and then the further universe there, they talk about creatures of the plains, and they're like, well, there's the Twisting Nether, the Elemental Plane, and the Emerald Plane. The Twisting Nether it doesn't coexist in a physical sense. It's kind of like the D&D version of the Shadow Plane. It's pure lunatic thought. And then kind of talks about how they would navigate it in a Dungeons and Dragons sense. Just if you ever went there, which doesn't really happen very much in the World of Warcraft universe. There's the Elemental Plane. It says it's a mystery to Azeroth's denizens. Yes, it's the home of the elementals, and you do experience some of it, but people traveling there, that's not really a thing in World of Warcraft. So that's more of they're saying, how could we deal with this? Because that is a thing in Dungeons and Dragons. The Emerald Dream, yes, that would be close to the astral plane. That would be as close as you could get to that, I guess. And so then they're just kind of describing nothing really history, more how you would travel about it. All right, so we'll read our flavor text, and that gets us, we'll be down to just one chapter left to look at this. But this one was very interesting in terms of geography and places, how much is already in place before they even released the Frozen Throne. All right, here we go. They stood in Ramox's tent, the 3 human adventurers and the Tauren who made up the adventuring party. Standing apart was the night elf hired as their scout. Brother Seabast's great treasure, a greenish sphere of pure crystal, pulsed at the center of the tent. The night elf looked over the party as the other 4 leaned forward to discern the forms that swam within the crystal's jade depths. The sphere itself belonged to Brother Seabast, their nominal leader. Ramox was an old veteran of the Alliance who claimed to have fought at the fall of Dalaran. Jurgen, the other warrior, was little more than a child, unblooded and eager for combat. Stormhoof the Tauren was dark and moody, questioning everything, yet all furrowed their brows trying to unlock the vision within the sphere. There, the night elf said, looking back into the sphere, you can see into the heart of the elven encampment in Ashenvale itself, clear as day. Looks like a forest, Ramox muttered into his beard. He was unimpressed by the vision. Such are the ways of the elves, Brother Seabast countered. They twist and warp the trees to their own desires, as they do all things. Jurgen snorted and shot the scout a sidelong glance. The night elf grimaced at Seabast's words, but said, You can see that the northern flank is but lightly guarded in comparison to the rest of the encampment. We could swing around, crossing upstream of their steading, and descend on them from that direction. Aye, Brother Seabast responded, that would be the best way to assault. We could come directly from the west, but I think we would be hung up along that river. The bridges look easily guarded and held against even an army, not to mention things like murlocs hanging about in the wet places. On the other hand, a few people could slip down for a raid and be gone before the night elves even knew we were there, he added almost to himself. Perhaps find a bit of magic as well while we're at it. I don't like it, Stormhoof said, his broad back brushing the inside of the tent. It seems too easy. How does she know all this, anyway? Suspicion is a poisonous thing among allies, the night elf said. The huge Tauren glowered at her in return. With a shrug, she continued, I have my own reasons to dislike these particular night elves. Let it suffice that what I say is truth, and that my advice is sound. It would delight me to no end to see you raid against Ashenvale. Let it go at that. What are those things along the north? They look like big trees, Jurgen asked, waving a finger over the orb. They are called ancients, the night elf replied, casting a glance with her good eye at each of the adventurers. It's the same one. Brother Seabast nodded sagely. Ramox looked bored, Stormhoof suspicious, Jurgen eager for plunder. Seeing no sign of recognition of the name, the night elf continued. They are weathered trees, millennia old, held in high regard by my former people. You will often find them near our campsites. Odd that they would leave these ancient trees far from any protection, the Tauren huffed. Look, their guard towers are all to the south and west. The scout shrugged again. These trees have survived for eons with little need for protection. But there, look in the sphere. You'll see the roots of that one entangle a mine opening. From beneath its roots, the night elves take their treasure. And we will take it from them, Jurgen said with a laugh. Ramox allowed himself a grin. Seems straightforward enough. It's not our fault they forgot to protect their flank. But is it safe? Stormhoof said. Tell me it is safe, elf. Swear on the deities you venerate. Of course, what you plan is the wisest action against my former people, responded the night elf. The crystal ball's green light illuminated the scar that snaked over the empty socket of her left eye. The Tauren snorted. Ramox said calmly, Swear by your gods. Reassure him. Of course, Ilune, the moon goddess, has given me her blessing, Oak Widow lied. She offered the assembled adventurers a mad grin. And what sort of god would allow her followers to suffer? Okay, some of these are recurring heroes. That was from the flavor text in the beginning. And that brings us down to the last chapter where we will wrap up. Just looking at this before we move on to the next piece of oddity out there in the Warcraft universe. Hey, I thank everybody so much for watching and for listening. I appreciate you. These shows are bright spots in my day as always, and I hope they are a little bit for you as well. Thank you so much for listening to Lore of Warcraft. This episode in the pipe 5x5.